So President Wright, which is joining us online tonight.
Here.
Councilman.
There.
Any idea?
He's not cool.
Okay.
Okay, he's a coach. Sorry.
Fair enough. All right, we have a quorum. We're still good to go.
Just FYI, all I see is City of Jervis. Doesn't show me anything else.
You know what we look like. So she has no picture?
She has.
Oh, yeah, the video's just turned off. Bottom left.
Oh, there we go. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm new at this. There we go. Oops.
Oh, click it back on. There we go.
It's on.
There. Sorry.
Yeah, it's at the top of the screen. Hi, Liz. All right, we'll start with the city manager, please.
Mr. Mayor, Council President Wright, and councilors. This evening is a scheduled work session. We have two esteemed professional planners here to have conversations with us. The idea is to learn and consider future direction on a couple of major policies. Sitting closest to the council is Kurt Fisher, who has a specialty as it relates to land use planning and housing, and is here as a result of a grant that the Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments got to assist various cities, including us, in updating our housing code so that it is not out of compliance with the state housing code as it currently is. And then after about 45 minutes with Mr. Fisher on housing, we will have our city planner, Holly, have a conversation with us about food carts, food vendors. What is it that we have? What is it that we want to discuss as changing, as we are currently without any substantive food cart, food vendor policies, rules, or regulations. So the intent is to be here about 80 minutes or so, 40 minutes talking about housing, and about 40 minutes talking about food cart, food vendors. And so unless council has questions, Mr. Fisher, the show is yours.
Hey. Thank you, City Manager. So my name is Kurt Fisher. I'm another planner that works alongside Holly. City's assigned to me, but this was a project that I was sort of giving the lead on to update these housing codes and fulfill the tasks for this particular grant in a variety of cities. And Jervis was one of the cities that expressed interest in taking advantage of the grant. So that's what we're doing here tonight. This is the, you should have a presentation printed out in front of you. If it's okay with you, I can just refer to those.
You want me to
slides.
share it on your screen?
Sure, if it's loaded up, yeah. So we could go to, yeah. That's a good place to start. So there are 4 major tasks involved with the grant. This is task 2, which is described as an audit and presentation of code concepts. It's described that way. The purpose is mainly to take a preliminary look through the code, compare it to what the current statutory requirements are, and identify the high level issues and items and categories of amendments that need to be addressed to bring it into consistency with the minimum state requirements. So we've got 3 objectives. The first is that I have listed up here is to make sure those statutes are met in code. The second is provide a clear and objective path for approving housing projects. That is a statewide policy that has been in effect for a number of years now, and there are more implementing statutes to make sure that local jurisdictions follow that clear and objective path. The main tool for achieving that is through the model code. the DLCD model housing code that they produced, which is in response to one piece of legislation to produce recommendations that are presumed to be clear and objective of review of housing. Excuse me. And then the last component is to review those review procedures to make sure that they also follow the objective standards. But there are more restrictions on how local jurisdictions can review those applications. We'll go into those as well. Next slide, please. So you've got three, you basically got three things in your packet here. The first is a memo that provides a narrative description of sort of the general process that the audit took, some high-level recommendations and findings, and some description of what you can expect the final amendment product to look like and the issues that are addressed. And to familiarize yourself with the direction this is going before you get the full strikeout text of the code amendments. That would be in task 3 that will come before you in a couple months. So these are the high-level recommendations that are described in that memo. Next slide, please.
Yeah.
The next attachment is described in a code audit matrix. And this is just one document. You don't have to understand the text that you're seeing here, but this is just meant to be illustrative of what's in the spreadsheet. And this is just a walkthrough of the different bills that have been presented. Some recent, some go back a few years, with some descriptions of the major elements of those bills and compares them to the state statute that's implementing them, how they are addressed or maybe not addressed in the model code, and the specific code sections that are affected by those provisions in the Jervis code, and provide some high-level description of how it will be addressed in the final amendments. So that's mainly just to relate what we're doing to the state rules to make sure that this isn't just coming out of, we're not inventing these amendments out of whole cloth. Next slide, please. And then the third piece that's in there, that's in your packet, is the DLCD Model Housing Code of 6. So this is a body of work that's in response to specific legislation. It's some model code recommendations that are presumed to be clear and objective. And they're created with input from experts all over the state. So they're being used as guidance and one example of best practice. This is not going to be adopted in its entirety. There are elements of it that I think are too technical and complex to really serve effective and really responsive to the needs of Jervis. So there's been a little bit of anxiety about that. But some of the elements I think are particularly helpful would be the definition section that would incorporate definitions for the different housing types and make sure those are consistent with state statutes. There are some helpful illustrations that demonstrate how the different housing types could be implemented by applicants and provide some helpful guidance on what the standards are and what can be done to comply with them. There are some citing standards. I would say expect the format of those standards to be reflected in the final amendments. The actual standards that are in those tables will be as close as practical to the current standards that are in service right now as practical. So we're not intending to make any large policy revisions and make any radical changes to the character of how housing looks or feels in Jervis. Not everything will be able to stay the same, but that's the goal. It's apply the state statutes, bring the code up to those standards. But we're not looking to charge a radical new policy for housing service. Next slide. So a lot of the just scroll down to the. So a lot of these bills are meant to incentivize and lower the barriers for approving housing products or housing types that are generally referred to as middle housing. And they're described as middle housing because they fit in between the gap of a typical single family detached dwelling and a larger multifamily apartment. So it's meant to capture the continuum of the different types of ways that cities can approve smaller, more affordable housing units, oftentimes on platted lots that offer more opportunities to get those smaller, affordable units without going fully into large multifamily complexes. And the advantage of these is oftentimes, especially when we're talking about duplexes and triplexes, they can be made to fit on single family lots, and oftentimes they can be designed in a way that preserves a lot of the traditional character. But again, one path to a little bit more density, affordability, and smaller that can be available to a broader range of people. Next slide, please. So duplexes are kind of the gateway into middle housing. So when middle housing rules were implemented, they were first implemented in our larger cities, which required on every lot that allowed single family homes, middle housing units up to a quadplex were required. And then the legislature followed that up with some rules that apply to smaller cities, medium-sized cities with population over 2,500, which is a category that Jervis fits into. And that legislation required duplexes to be permitted, just duplexes, not triplexes, quadplexes, to be permitted on every lot where a single family home was allowed. And even more recently than that, they have been made eligible for what's called a middle housing land division, which cities must approve on every lot that allows that ORS 197A 420 applies to. And the purpose of a middle housing land division is to allow individual ownership of each of those attached units. So one of the unappealing aspects of middle housing and other attached housing types for housing developers were that typically both units were sited on the same lot. So you either had an owner living in one unit and then renting out the other, or just owned by a landlord that didn't live on property and were renting it out. And typically housing developers want to sell off individual lots. They want to sell off the finished products to individual buyers. So that's what the middle housing land division, that's how the little middle housing land division came into being. And I'll get into a little bit more details of how the middle housing land division works. With the middle housing land division, the the town slide.
No.
So with middle housing land divisions, the townhouse building form is taking on a larger role. This generally refers to those, in the past, it's been referred to those attached units, which can be a duplex, triplex, and can be a multi-family development as well. But they're in that row formation to make them more aesthetically, I guess, consistent with single family homes. And under the current rules, they no longer become attached. So this is one way of providing more of that density that's required and more housing on individual lots. Next slide, please. So the middle housing land division. So typically, when lots for housing are created, they're created through a traditional subdivision or a partition. They're subject to minimum lot size requirements, and then individual units are placed on lots that meet setback and lot coverage standards that are written in the development code. Those rules, that general model still applies at the land division level, at the standard land division level, but then there's another land division that now can take place after that. So what you see here is a duplex that's already been sited on a lot, and what happens is the building permit comes in on the traditional lot, and the setbacks are reviewed for placement of that home on that lot after it's been created by a subdivision. But then if the landowner or the developer wants to place each unit under separate ownership and sell them off individually, they can pursue this process. Next slide. And the next slide shows you the result of that. And the result are, in addition to the standard lot, which is created by a traditional subdivision, you have, which is now called a parent lot, you have these child lots. Now the setbacks and all the traditional development standards apply to the parent lot, and then another dividing line is placed right in between the two units that creates the two child lots. So the standard development standards for housing applies to the parent lot, but then it does not apply to the middle divide plot. It is reviewed as an attached housing product from there, or if it's not attached, the only requirement is that it's building separation at that middle divide. So that's a new concept that everybody's getting used to, keeping the requirements that apply to parent lots and child lots separate, understanding when those standards apply and when they don't. Sure.
So Jervis has actually received 4 applications for middle housing land divisions, and they've all been duplexes submitted at the same time as the division. So of all the communities I serve, you've had the most submitted so far in the last year. Moving forward.
They've been submitted at the same time as the subdivision partition,
As the
or as the building.
building permit.
So they can be done. So the law requires that they be allowed either concurrently with a traditional subdivision or concurrently with the. So the developer comes in for a subdivision or a partition, they can show those child lots being created at the same time. They can include that on their layout, or they can do the regular subdivision and then divide those lots at the kind of thing. So the middle housing land division is at the same time. So both permits being reviewed. And this is just an example of how this might work in a multifamily. So these are 5 attached townhomes, so this would be defined as a multifamily, as a townhouse style multifamily development. Next slide, please. Bonus units. So House Bill 2138 requires local governments to approve a density bonus for units that are either fit the definition of affordable or accessible. Those requirements are included in the definition section. The bonus is up to 1 additional unit for a duplex or triplex, up to 2 for the multi-unit housing types. And the city must provide some allowance to some relief from dimensional requirements to make those. There's no strict standard. There's some guidance in the model code for doing that. I think it's too technical. I don't think it serves Jervis particularly well. But the concept that we're moving towards is to just allow the opportunity for the housing type that results from the bonus to be approved, to be reviewed and approved as that housing type. So there would be additional. So there's a minimum lot requirement, area requirement that increases as those units go up. As you increase units, so if those bonus units are included, there will be an allowance for the allowance to waive the additional lot size requirement for that additional. Next slide, please. So I included this slide in here to demonstrate to the council that the ways in which these housing types are already allowed under the Jervis Code, and to point out some examples of what may change as a result of the amendments. And again, it's the criteria here are for preserving existing policy as much as possible while meeting standard requirements. So as I said, there's a requirement that duplexes are permitted on each lot that allows a single family dwelling. So the single family dwellings are required to provide 60, and this is for the R2 zone, are required to provide 6,600 square feet of area. So the duplex has to be reviewed on the same standards. By the more restrictive standards to a duplex apply to the single family. You can for triplex. There's no requirement that you approve triplexes. So those are same thing with the accessory dwelling units. You can't require additional lot area for ADUs to require to allow one lot. That's what I'm saying. Quadplexes. There are siting requirements. So the siting requirements that are in the model code, for the guidance for siting requirements that's in the model code, sliced up into a few different categories, and we'll speak to quadplexes and triplexes. Jervis doesn't, I guess, define quadplexes as a specific housing type. These are standards that apply specifically to quadplexes. As you can see there's a multifamily requirement for 4 units for developments that include 4 units, so they would be effective. Current standards, it would be as a multifamily. development and not a quadplex. So that's one question to consider, whether or not you want to stay with that, or whether or not you want to put quadplexes in the residential zones. The main difference there between reviewing those as quadplexes versus multifamily is that multifamily developments typically require some usable community open space with some sort of communal improvement, whereas quadplexes are thought of more as reviewed under similar standards to a single. It's just split up into 4 units. So that's the main effect or outcome of that decision, whether or not to include quadplexes as permitted. I wanted to highlight the fact that under the current standards, the more units you have, there's some increase in lot area. I think in a couple presentations so far, I think there's been a perception that triplexes and quadplexes would be forced to be approved on the same size lots as single family. That's not it. And then the townhouse standard, like I said, so you allow townhouses now with a traditional land division, but there's a minimum lot size requirement for those individual townhomes. With the middle housing land division, those townhouse lots that are the result of subdivision or partition can be divided further into smaller middle housing lots. So that really creates a very small middle housing child lot if somebody were to attempt to do that. So it may not be desirable to keep that minimum lot size and just rely on the middle housing to achieve those small lot sizes. Next slide. And then the procedural updates. House Bill 4037 revised the section of Oregon revised statutes that address clear and objective standards and placed more restrictions on the procedures that local jurisdictions apply to housing or housing applications. And those include they have to be approved. The initial decision has to be made without a public hearing. It has to be an administrative approval. There's limits on the notification area. That is the area of the notice that is sent out when receiving a land use application for housing. And there's restrictions on who can actually appeal the decision. Only the applicant can appeal the decision to, in this case, to right now or use of, but one it would be the plan. So right now, nearly all the housing applications are subject to a type 2 process and JERVIS, which is a quasi-judicial procedure that requires a public hearing. So House Bill 4037 prevents that. And then there are another category of housing applications that are typically, that in the past have been reviewed under discretionary standards and have been subject to quasi-judicial procedures, that when they're include housing, they also cannot be subject to it. And those are planning and developments. Residential zone changes that involve a zone change from lower density zone destination to high density zone destination. So R2 in JERVIS. And variances to any housing standard. So the type 2 process would need to be revised to the standards. The state standards, that's called a limited land use application. And that's an administrative decision with notice and with a option. And then there would be the type 1 would be a preserved administrative process, which is generally applications that only involve hard measurements that are shown in the actual application. So those typically are signs, planning review, building permit, fences, final review of the final plat, after preliminary review of a preliminary plat. And again, those are prescribed by statute. So we'll try and preserve the public hearing process wherever possible, but there's going to be a much diminished role for quasi-judicial decision making when it comes to housing applications.
Can I highlight something here?
Sure.
So in the past, when Jervis has had a new subdivision application come in, we have brought that to public hearing for the council to decide. Now what that means is that a new subdivision in Jervis would be a staff level decision with a 14-day neighbor comment period ahead of time. So it's gonna feel pretty different in terms of the amount of public engagement allowed. It feels like a lot less.
Can the council appeal themselves staff decision?
This question came up a couple nights ago in a different city about the ability of a commission or council to call up a decision.
I don't think so.
Well, they're not the applicant. The statute says only the applicant can appeal.
Standing.
Hmm?
They don't have standing.
This statute hasn't been tested. We've done that, so I have created that opportunity in other cities, but I don't think it will. I don't think it will do that now. HB 4037 is pretty restrictive in that way. Yeah, so last slide here are just some of the things I referred to in the presentation earlier, just some things to think about. Talk about the fact of adding quadplexes as a permitted housing type. That would be only in the R2 zone, and that would subject the quadplexes, which would now are being replaced for to reduced set of siting standards that are similar to what you subject to, without the extra siting requirements that are included with multifamily. And the definition of multifamily would complement that decision if you wanted to go that direction. So in the model code, the definition of multifamily starts with five units. And then the townhouse lot standards that may create with middle housing land divisions, preserving that lot size may create unintended consequences that we may want to. So happy to take. Do we have time? If you want to share your thoughts now, digest later.
I just have a quick question, I guess. For the townhouses at the bottom part, from R2, retain the R2, is there a difference between R1? Like, what's the difference, I guess is what my question is. Between R1 and R2, is that, does it? With changing this townhouse to an
The only
R1?
difference between R1 and R2 is that multifamily. So the R1 typically is a single family zone, but Jervis already allows a lot of the housing types. So the only restriction on townhomes would be see that townhouse form in triplex. With 3 attached. Whereas in R2, we do more than 3.
Question.
And all those types no longer have to be attached, so you have, so they're not, I think you can see a lot less. Fewer townhomes that actually share a wall, there's going to be
Oh, there could be a space between.
separation, so they're even going to be more resemble single family.
It's a made-up housing type, a detached townhome.
Because most single family homes have to have X amount of space between them, correct? And since it's,
That was gonna be my question, how far apart are they gonna be?
I guess it doesn't matter, right?
Building
So just building code, minimum separation required by.
code, 6 feet. Question here.
Yes.
If the words that we use, like the single family house and the duplex and the triplex and the fourplex and the multi-family and multi-unit, all refer to the number of units. But townhouse refers to the shape of the structure. Do we even need to use this term anymore? Is it just obsolete now if we're just counting rather than shaping?
Probably, it's probably gonna be that way.
Can we just?
I mean, it's probably going that way, but
Sorry to put you on the spot there, but it's starting to feel obsolete.
yes, it is the term used to guide some of the site standards that's in the model code. They have standards for a multi-unit development that's a traditional apartment complex, I think for standard, what they call a townhouse style multi-unit development. And yeah, I think it's an attempt to be helpful to applicants, developers, to be able to implement standards that that are good for implementing that particular housing form, and distinguish it from a traditional complex. Again, I think the reason why the middle housing is being promoted and incentivized as a solution for a housing problem, because it can be made to fit with the character and aesthetic of single family neighborhoods more closely than multi-family complexes.
So I'd like to frame a question. I'd like to frame the crux of the policy question to the council. And Kurt, if I miss a beat here as to the choice here, please correct me. As Holly mentioned, we've already had up to 4 apps consideration. And the concern that we have heard, and council hears it more than I do, is the number of units being increased without increasing the amount of curb space.
Got you.
The less than positive perspectives that have been shared fairly consistently by members of our community is not allowing the increase of units because we're not increasing curb space. So if taking that to heart, what we've heard from the community is the question before the council to lean towards increasing number of units as much as possible as a policy and direction. or not increasing and doing what we're required to do in state law. And that is where the council would like to draw the line. I'm the yin and the yang here, and I'm thinking that, you know, the council could speak for themselves, they do a great job. But I'm thinking that mostly what we've heard is not increasing the numbers to a maximum amount in order to address livability concerns that have come up based upon the lack of parking. There's nothing about off-street parking in any of this legislation, right?
No, there's no requirement.
No.
And that's
So I'm
my,
not, and I'm assuming that,
Their
The-
ADU standards need to be revised.
It supersedes ours. It's our current code requires additional off-street parking if the ADU is built, but the new Oregon law supersedes our rules. In essence,
that's true.
double the population in a given lot without any additional parking spaces being added.
and that's one thing I wanted to ask about. I mean, if this is mandated, we could be having to do a lot of this stuff, I can understand that. But why can we not put a mandate on it also saying, okay, go ahead, put your duplex in there, put your triplex in there, but guess what? You will be required to have 2 parking spots per plex on site, not on the road,
And
per unit,
that's what the standard is.
Well, it's not for multiple.
not for multi, what I've seen in the pictures, it's showing one car, one garage, you know, so I'm saying on site, on the property.
I may have failed to remind Kurt that in Jervis, all roads lead to parking question. It is a very challenge that we have in the community.
It's the demographics, I mean, we have
Large households.
large families living in these houses, so our average is about 3 to 4 vehicles per house.
Our multifamily is multifamily,
Yes,
not single family with 2 cars. It's 2
Same.
families with 4 cars.
Multiple families in one.
And how that manifests is difficulty with emergency vehicles getting through garbage haulers.
Well, and our streets weren't built up to like a code too. They were built up to a standard code, but not the code for a fire truck to get down. We had a fire on our road at the beginning of our road. My husband had to leave our cul-de-sac, and the fire department told him to go through the fence down the road just so he could leave. And he's like, no, it's a dead end. Like the fire departments don't even know our streets. And then they had to come down our road because they can't back out and then back into my driveway just to leave. So streets, codes, parking code, like everything is not meeting our Jervis.
Well,
It's so small.
There's no plan to change the minimum parking requirements in the code. There's no restriction on that. The city's has. So that can be preserved.
Could it be increased for multifamily? It's been
Just to,
been asked
just
in
go back
recent
to
years,
two,
is it
just
all
go back
units
to
to be at 2
two.
sides?
I thought we were restricted on duplexes. That we couldn't require.
Well, subject to the same standards as same. So you can apply the same standard to.
And an application, I believe, with new single-family home permits, it counts as 1 in the garage and 1 in the driveway. And a lot of us have, you know, stuff in our garage. Treasures, toys.
Our garage, have our storage unit.
Right. My own included. So I guess functionally, what does that result? So I guess I would assume the council would be interested to know if during this process, they could actually increase the off-street parking minimum for all units to be 2, aside from the ADUs.
Rick.
Would that be something that we'd have to change in like our city code itself? Or is this like something that we could add to our city codes for developers, or does it strictly have to follow your guys' guidelines? Or like,
In theory,
You can make that change for all that. That's yours.
You know, the builders are probably.
They don't like anything we do.
Yeah, we gotta do what's best for the residents.
Yeah.
Having 4 more vehicles per unit on the roads, it's not going.
the last two multifamily applications we processed have done more than the bare minimum. Actually, the last 3, I think. At the strong suggestion of city staff. And we leaned in very hard on this, trying to get more.
Did it make the cost of the units go up for people trying to purchase them?
That's a good question. I don't think it resulted in any fewer units on site. I think each of those applications, they were already maxed out of the number of housing units that you get based upon the size of the property.
They elected to reduce the size of on-site storage units or eliminate them altogether in place of adding parking spaces. For the most current.
Or meet the bare minimum of the play areas or the landscaping or the storm. So all those were kind of reduced to the bare minimum to maximize parking.
Kurt, what do you want to hear from them tonight? You want to come back with the model?
Dialogue. I mean, I've heard the parking. The parking issue. You only have the 2 residential districts. You're already pretty generous in all the middle housing types that you allow already in both districts. I would suggest considering making the R1 a true single family zone, but what happens there is that's a change creates larger policy problems with the city's housing needs. Because you're reducing the lot density to a point where you affect how it's are applicable to meet the statewide. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that requires more complex findings to make that decision. But like I said, you have been very generous in all the housing types that are currently allowed. The property you're describing, obviously, the current standards, the main difference here is that no housing land division can put those units on. You can developers can develop up to that density now under the current code. These changes.
So if it's helpful, the code currently says that multifamily developments are defined as 3 or more units, and they shall provide a minimum recreation area of 100 square feet per residential unit.
3 or more, not more than 3.
3 or more.
Oh.
So that means even a triplex would be required to provide a play area. So maybe this standard should be reviewed. One way or another.
I highly agree with that. I don't think that we have enough room to have play structures with only require them to put all that on there. That's gonna detour developers also when we need more housing. So I think it should be, 5 or more. Personally. I also had a question on the 14-day review. Can we, for public comment, can we make that higher, like 20 days? I understand that we're wanting to make the process faster, but some people are out of town for that 2 weeks. What if they take their 2-week vacation during that 2-week public comment period?
I understand your point, but the statute's clear and the answer is no. Sorry.
Can the buffer be expanded from, say, 100 to 200?
You can go up to 500 feet for developments of 20 units.
20 or more. What about 4?
Sorry.
I'm guessing that we would like to see us in compliance with state law. And not above that. And something addressing our parking issue. We don't want to increase. We don't want to change our definition of multifamily from 4 to 5 because that increases the number of units.
No, it decreases the outdoor space requirement for quad boxes and triplexes, so it allows more space for parking. For on-site parking.
So maybe we do want to increase.
That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, that's what Liz was saying.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying multifamily should be 5 units or more.
For the purpose.
Yeah.
While we have that,
Or you could. Recreation area requirement too.
well, it is rather squishy. In recent applications, there hasn't been a lot of direction about what qualifies as such.
Still never management slash park space.
Put a bench,
Small.
you put like a park bench near the, on the chicken pond.
It's a water feature.
Well, have you heard enough as for our concerns or that tweak the model a little bit and bring it back to it, look at it or.
It'll be very, it'll be simplified, yes.
Thank you. I definitely agree. I mean, like I said, bring it up to code. But no more unless the council agrees. Definitely address the parking policy. That's, yeah, we gotta do something about that, so.
We're good?
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Mr. Fisher. Welcome to the team.
That's a lot.
Welcome.
Got a pretty esteemed company next to you there, so.
We are
Spoils
so,
us well.
we are so grateful for Kurt being the subject matter expert on that. Otherwise, every single one of the planners would be pulling their hair out while trying to,
No, you guys would just always take my advice, which is we don't have to change our code because state law says we have
Come on, customer service.
to. Yeah, you're right. But it's how I feel. Station gets to tell us how to do stuff.
So Holly, I believe you're up next.
Yes, sir. Okay. Ready for something a little more colorful? A little more tasty?
Nothing is more tasty than,
Housing code.
yes.
Okay. So this work session topic is food cart standards. You have a memo in your packet this evening, just introducing the topic. And so City Hall has received
99.
City Hall has received several applications and inquiries about starting up new food carts or food booths in your community. And what I've heard from City Hall is that we need a better way to regulate this business type to ensure that it's done in an appropriate manner, that they're operating in the right places and have an opportunity to succeed. So by that, I mean your municipal code allows temporary merchants on a 45-day permit. And if you want food carts as an authentic part of your local economic development, as a way to grow jobs and investment in businesses, then 45 days isn't going to probably do that for you. And so what we would like to talk about tonight is a discussion about enhancing the provisions in your codes to allow food carts to operate on a longer term basis, while still ensuring that they're following some basic standards. A lot of communities in Oregon have been adopting new food cart standards in the last few years. There's been a proliferation of food carts, both single carts and cart pods, clusters. And no two cities really use the exact same language. They have different approaches to how they regulate food carts. Some try to maintain as much control in the municipal code as possible, and then others included in the development code. I know Tyler and I have had some conversations about the best way to do this, and I think it really depends on how the city council would like to see food carts operate in your community. What I've included in the memo is just kind of a table of all the different standards that we have seen come up in recent years. The first section of that table has to do with procedural considerations. How do we permit them? How long do we permit them? What does the form and the fee look like? How do they renew? How do they get revoked or appealed? So procedural stuff. And then the second part of that table really has to do with the food cart location, the site standards. What we can do tonight is talk through each of those. If you like, you can give me some direction. We can draft some language based upon other communities and the directions we hear tonight, and then return to you with draft code language. That would be a great place to start. I do want to reiterate that any language that the city adopts for regulating food carts will be in addition to what county health department, fire code, and state already have in place. Those permits continue to apply. A lot of communities, for example, regulate food carts to be operating in zones that already allow restaurant establishments. So what that looks like is only in a commercial zone, sometimes an industrial zone if it's on a main thoroughfare in your community. A lot of communities allow food carts to either be self-contained or to make direct connections to city municipal utilities. Sometimes they can share utilities if there are already operating businesses on that site. So a lot of different considerations that go into these food cart pods especially. We can start going through this table, or we can just have a general discussion based upon what you've observed in other communities and what the priorities are to you. I will look for your direction.
Well, one of the questions I ask is, I mean, people are trying to survive nowadays, so everybody's trying to do what they can, they're working on jobs, do food carts, things like that. But there's still standards to follow when we're doing this. So the whole thing is, like, we see a residence, we know they have a business out of it, but they don't have a permit. A big concern I have is, are we liable in case somebody gets food poisoning from there because the city is basically allowing the food vendor to be there? There's concerns right here in the first place. I don't know what the rules are for that.
For you, that specific concern, no, because we don't regulate the food safety aspect of any food places. That's county.
Is that OSHA? Is that OSHA?
Or,
I think it's through the county.
Oh,
Yeah.
environmental health,
yeah, authority.
that too.
Not OSHA.
Okay, that's good to hear. Thank you very much. as for the timelines, you're right, I don't see 30 or 45 days working with especially the type of businesses that are trying to be popping up around here. You got the coffee shop over here. They want to sell coffee to people building on the schools. Great, I'm good with that, but what's the limitation? I mean, the schools can be being worked on for how long? Much longer? Reasonably a year? Yeah.
Well, the new one at the school, is that almost a concern too, because that's now zoned public use?
Yeah, I think the school gave them permission though, didn't they?
Yeah,
I heard the school gave them permission to actually park there and to help them out. Still.
Which is not code, not code for commercial or.
Or if they went to the firework lot, that would actually be better. I'm just,
Yeah, I don't know. I want to help people out. I want the residents to be able to survive, do things, but we still got to live within the regulations, rules set forth by the state, county. That's the basics right there. Now, do you have an average on the other cities, smaller cities, what their pods and their food courts are like when it comes to the timelines?
A lot of cities will allow food carts to operate year round as long as they remain in compliance.
Okay.
I know, I work in a bigger town in Happy Valley.
Yeah.
And there's, down the road, there's Cartlandia where there's 20 units on a big unit. And then you've got 3 or 4 similar right across the street from where I work. And they've been there for years, so probably very similar protocols.
Yeah.
Well, we're definitely not to the point where we're gonna have a pod yet. I see like what we've seen right now is just a couple individual ones popping up. So zoning's definitely a concern and should be a condition that they're in the right areas. Like I don't want a food cart popping up right next to the park where everybody's gonna park their cars to come visit the park. Like that just doesn't seem right. But the ice cream man, driving past the park, that's great. I love to hear that. Love to see him. He gets good business driving past the park. Or a little cart, if he wants to walk through because he's moving, that's kind of a different scenario than an actual cart that's going to be parked somewhere for weeks or months on end.
It is great, but are they operating on a permit right now? Or they just drive through town selling ice cream, selling tamales, stuff like that to other people, like we know they're doing. I mean, the rules are still not being followed.
When I was an ice cream guy, I had to go to City Hall and get permit so I could go through town and whatnot. So.
Correct. But even like the salesmen that come around, the solicitors come around. The first thing I ask when they come doors, can I see your permit? And they're like, what are you talking about? I said, well, I'm the mayor, first of all. And second of all, I know you need to have a permit. Do you have it? And they usually run off. Is it? We got to hold everybody accountable to the same rules. That's all there is to it, I think. We got a gentleman out here. I love to see him out here because he sells little rainbow, umbrella on his hand cards, walking around the towns, selling to people and stuff. Yeah. Probably not doing the permit.
Sure. So successful food carts not only provide or expand your local restaurant options for residents, they can also encourage visitors to stay longer if there's pass-through traffic. And in your best case scenario, it's a new business starting out testing their menu. They're building their customer base, they're testing their menu to eventually someday launch into a permanent brick and mortar business. So that is an opportunity that we certainly would want to see in your community, in your commercial areas, your zones. In the meantime, though, it sounds like you could use a little more regulation about where they're operating and how they're operating.
In the links of the permits.
Yeah.
Timelines. I mean, now that we have, it's ice cream summertime. 3 months out of the year, ice cream trucks going around all the time. Or maybe that should be moved up to 90-day for some kind of considerations.
Yeah. Your municipal code has 4 different business license types currently as temporary. They have a peddler, a solicitor, a street vendor, and a temporary merchant. Food carts are most like a temporary merchant in that they are stationary at a fixed location, not in the street, not moving around. But a little more regulation might benefit the community. Some of the things that we see come up time and again are you see a proliferation of seating and awning like canopies, and you see more signage and trash cans, and so it starts to grow as they become more successful. You just want to ensure that they're not competing into the public street right of way or blocking driveways, that type of thing. I am intending to ask Kyle for his opinion about whether we would like to require food carts to be self-contained or whether the city is interested in allowing food carts to make connections to city water and sewer with the standard permits and forms and fees that are required.
Well, requiring them to connect to city services greatly increase the cost to the business, and probably prohibitively so. But with that, there would be more control as far as requiring grease traps and that to prevent buildup within the sanitary sewer system. But at the same time, a self-contained unit is also more expensive to operate because they're having to bring in their own water and have the septic system essentially pumped on a regular basis as well. There's upsides to both and downsides to both. More connections to the city sewer, 20 years down the road, they don't, they're put in hastily, they can start leaking and create more issues for treatment, volume, all that. So I really don't have a strong opinion either way, but just the code should state, grease contained would be my biggest concern because those start manifesting problems almost immediately. Regards to how it enters the system.
Yeah.
We have a situation today that's very rapid due to these same types of issues.
And I don't remember what the code says about splitting utilities on a property. So if there was an existing building and a business and they wanted to bring in a food cart on the same parking lot, could they split water? Could they share a wastewater?
It's not really clearly defined. Where there's clear definition would be more applied to like an ADU, the accessory dwelling unit,
Right.
where previous council wanted to make it harder to be approved. So they required separate off-street parking, complete separate system development charges and utility. So some of that could be applied. Yeah.
I'll tell you, in other communities recently, the most time spent on this topic was about actually when SDCs are triggered for food carts. They wanted new connections to water and sewer. And the idea is that once you establish new services for water and sewer on a property, they are always serving that property. And once the SDCs are paid, that credit carries and attaches to that property forever. But they could become cost prohibitive potentially for food carts if there were no other services on the property. So there was a lot of discussion about that in other communities when they trigger.
We want to encourage it, but
Yeah.
at the same time, not at the city's expense down the road.
Right, it's also very expensive to not require them to pay SDCs.
Right.
So that's good.
Yeah. So most recently in Willamina, the procedures they've settled on are for a single food cart. Locating, it would just be like a business license on an annual basis, and they could renew as long as they remain in compliance. But if it's a food cart pod, they would actually go through a site development review because it would be a more intensive use. Typically, there's a permanent structure on that, and then that could also trigger frontage improvements like sidewalks or off-street parking. So the more carts you have in that pod, the more intensive the use in terms of the car trips. That's open to all that discussion as well. Rick, as frontline at City Hall answering these questions, which standards are most critical to you in regulating these business types?
I think the largest issue we have is access and parking. I mean, at what point is a residential garage selling pizza providing a place people to park and do business that doesn't affect their neighborhood? At what point does someone selling tamales or chicken or whatever from their house? At what point does a food cart that is on a major county road, third, that has no parking there besides their driveway of their house. So from a City Hall perspective, it's a safety issue. Appropriate access, safe place to park, people not being, neighborhood with no sidewalks at all, which is where we've seen a couple of them. So we're concerned about the safety side of this, quite honestly.
Yeah.
In the way of regulatory, even if they're self-contained, where are they dumping what they need to dump when they need to dump? I'm casting aspersions here, but just because they don't have a direct connection doesn't mean that there isn't a need to dispose material that may or may not end up in our system. So that's an unknown.
Yeah.
Again, that's a safety sanitation perspective. Mm-hmm. Structurally, I'm not aware of anything that we City Hall really have a concern about. It's just about access in and out and sanitation and disposal of waste that may or may not be put into our person holes in the middle of the street, in the middle of the night, or whatever. But that's my perspective. What our concerns.
I think the city has a concern about what zones these are operating in as well.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So you could think of a business making food as a restaurant, because you're making and selling food. And restaurants are not typically allowed in your R1 and R2 zones. Those are intended to be residential zones. As a property owner, when I buy a property in that zone, I have certain expectations about what my neighbors will be doing and how much traffic will be coming to our house. These types of temporary merchants are really designed to be in more commercial areas. The city does allow folks to operate businesses from their homes through a home occupation permit, but that's when you're not impacting your neighbors. So a lot of people will do billing from home. Sometimes things by appointments only if they're tutoring or teaching music lessons, sometimes haircutting, that kind of thing. But it's not, home occupations do not allow big signs and drive-by traffic. It's not intended to be a commercial operation. And so that's typically where cities draw the line of these types of merchants belong in a commercial area where there is parking and there is pass-by traffic. Out of
Can-
respect for the neighborhood, if nothing else.
So would that help if we rezoned, like I'm just thinking, from Dollar General through downtown, would it have to be, can we rezone it like multi-use? And that would encompass both residential and commercial?
So it's an interesting idea. If there are corridors in the community that the council feels may be suited for some types of commercial operations, to allow kind of an overlay for mixed use in the existing residential areas. You could certainly discuss that if that was of interest.
Okay, I'm not understanding. What's your proposal?
It's just the discussion currently. Usually food carts are only allowed in commercial areas, not in neighborhoods.
So you're not getting a zone for a spot for these truck people to be, like they were saying? No,
Just talking about standards if folks were interested.
the standard that they were just, okay,
Yeah.
okay, sounds good. Be confused here.
For now, I feel personally that self-contained food carts for now are going to be our safest bet. With the rule of they must dispose of their own gray matter water in an appropriate area, not, on the city road or in the city park or something of the sort.
A lot of units that are self-contained hire a third-party pumping service that comes to the site and pump them. Exactly. And a lot of communities that have food cart permits require not only the property owner authorization, but details about how each of these utilities are handled. Where are you getting your water? How are you handling your wastewater? And in the cities that do allow a municipal connection, is your grease trap in place? And do you have even an easement for the city to come in and inspect that grease trap? So ensure that it's working and it's properly sized.
That would greatly complicate each application.
If they
How they have
chose
to
to
draft
go
it.
that route, if they chose to not be self-contained.
I like the self-contained with the essential documentation of how they're disposing. Because stuff does end up in the sewer system that is blocked. This one, shoot.
That's unfair.
So yes, people do access.
Was it my size?
And the other thing that's probably going to make an issue with this, the fact that a lot of these refuse stations that have been around not in business anymore, because the estates have shut down because they cost too much. So I could see somebody take a 5-gallon pail of cooking grease and dump it down the toilet part. You just.
Anybody do that, so.
Yeah. It could have been, most people have their own homes to dump it down.
Unless it's our requirement.
Well, that's why he's taking shoes and stuff. I don't know, what's the suggestion? Like, I like the idea of self-contained ones. The paperwork, identifying how they're gonna dispose of it will be.
I like Holly's idea too of the 1 year for the business license. I kind of wrote down some just time. I'm okay with peddler because if we have like a festival or whatever, 4th of July, whatever. So we would have the peddler, which would be 5 days. So that would be like they're just coming for the 4th of July festival and then they're gonna go.
Yeah, but even the people, the tamale people they're peddlers.
Right.
And they
Yeah,
go for 5 days.
Yeah, and then solicitors, I'm okay with 10. I think the street vendors and temporary should be like 90, and then we should offer like a 1 and 3 year. I think would be the best bet for the food carts. So if they think that they're gonna be past the 1 year, give them a 3 year option too.
A lot of communities have a 1 year business license, but Jervis does not currently have that, correct?
We don't have a business license program. This time.
We do not, okay.
My recommendation would be no longer than 1 year, because then we're at least having them come in and sign documentation every year saying we're doing things right. If we let them go out for 3 to 5 years without ever checking back, even if they aren't intending to break the rules, they just start doing whatever's convenient, and we don't have that touch point every year. So I think that can cause more problems.
A lot of times at the annual renewal, they'll have a fire inspection as well to ensure they're still up to code on extinguishers and venting and all things.
And how often do the self-contained ones have to prove that they're disposing of stuff correctly?
In the past, they've just filled out the annual permit that just says how they're doing it, what service they're using. They haven't been proving it. But certainly, every city has their own standards, so if that's something that you folks felt strongly about, we could request that documentation.
And I don't mind the 1 year either.
Yeah.
I would prefer it to be on a commercial zone property.
As soon as they follow all the protocols and regulations.
It's just, I mean, right now we have something residential, we know that. But I mean, how does it affect the neighbors, like you said, or even if you have been for a long time, I understand that. I agree, it should be by zone, the way it's supposed to be.
We want them to be successful.
Yes, definitely. Now, the duration of permits. Since we know what a peddler is, we know we get them around here, right? Would it be possible to divide that into 2 different types? Short-term peddler, long-term peddler? Maybe like I said, a 5-day one for the people just going through once or twice, and then like a 30 or 90-day one. The ones that actually want to go around once a week, twice a week. To the neighborhoods.
Do you process many of that type of a permit, Rick? The peddlers and solicitors, do you have many folks come through?
Not very many at all. In fact, I think 2 in the year I've been here.
Okay.
This may be a question for legal here. If you do draft the language and it has definitive, clear sounding implications, permit requirements, any other requirements that it's agreed upon, would the city be obligated to pursue some of these that are operating out in, out of their garages, for instance? I know of one that's open, certain days of the week out in the garage. Would we be obligated or set up for any kind of liability if they continue to operate residential while these other businesses are required to obey these new rules?
We wouldn't be obligated unless our council affirmatively obligated as a staff to go after them. It wouldn't be opening us up for any liability. But it would be certainly best practice to crack down on the non-compliant individuals.
Could we implement like having a fine for not being in compliance with the zoning regulations?
The compliance would be not operating an unauthorized food business out of your house. If you live in a residential zone and we don't allow it in a residential zone. I mean, there could be fines also, but we would want compliance more important. But that would be my recommendation.
You could certainly give a grace period for folks to come into compliance, whether that's a 6-month or what have you. Again, with the goal being, we want you to be successful.
Do we have commercial land that they can even be on right now? Because everything is residential or public, right? Like, we're gonna put all these in place and then there's not gonna be a spot for them to actually be. So
There's it's all mostly privately owned. The example is here at the home company. It's a zoned commercial, and they they've gone through the proper channels for the, you know, the temporary permit, but they're allowing on their businesses, they have space, parking, doesn't impede traffic. The Jervis is fairly limited to the properties.
Yeah.
On hand, most of the industrial and commercial zones are tied up in government property.
I'm just thinking for our coffee shop, right now, they did ask permission for the school, but after the school, they go back to their residential. Like, and if we're gonna put that in place, their coffee shop's gonna be out unless they also talk with Data Vision about being on their property. I mean, they're two different food trucks, obviously, food, drink, it might be best to work with each other, but we're gonna restrict housing out of our garages and stuff, and then you need a commercial spot for something. If we want this to work in the town, we need to have a commercial lot of some kind.
Certain builders have, you know, had some foresight that the apartment.
Yes,
Next door, they have, 2 specific spots for food carts. I don't know the details as far as whether the costs have been prohibitive, maybe it's just not been advertised, whether there's been no activity or interest.
I had one came in today.
Today, okay.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
that was a little bit of foresight that I believe was encouraged, you know, because there was some dead space on the property, the way the property lines were.
Polly, sorry.
Data Vision has been encouraging and even tried to get the coffee cart to come down on their property.
Okay.
Data Vision's in an interesting predicament that they want to help and support our local economy. They want to help and support the people that are trying to start up a business. But they can't get directly involved because of regulations of how their business is managed through FCC as a co-op. But they can facilitate and allow other businesses to be on their property. And they have been approaching and attempting to entice additional food service providers onto it.
So it's nice because they do have the farm right there.
For those watching, you heard it. Data Vision wants you to come sell food.
Polly, do you know of any cities that have allowed food carts on public facilities property?
I will say a lot of cities carve out exemptions for certain food carts operating in an event or in a temporary kind of situation. So for example, a food cart comes into a high school for, you know, big games or something like that on a temporary basis.
I know the schools got food trucks to come in for events that they've done, and they're just like temporary, like Dakota
Yeah.
Ice trucks will come in,
Yeah.
coffee truck and burger taco trucks.
Yeah.
For
So a lot of
school events, and it's just like temporary for the night or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they're gone.
So it's a little bit different than a year-round food truck.
Does the city own any land that could be turned into a food truck haven? I don't know.
Almost all is in residential areas. There is some adjacent to commercial properties, but it's their actual streets, even if they're unapproved, so there's no facilities.
So it's all like alleyways and whatnot.
Yeah, our city's better resource.
There's a weird spot over, I think, it's on Elm Loop or something. There's like, you drive down Elm and there's just like this weird cutout. What is that?
That is the topic of conversation.
This is so weird right there, resident. Isn't that?
I've had some residents actually, Kyle, approach me to see if we could do a community garden right there.
Oh,
There is question as to the ownership.
oh,
Based on-
So Holly, do you think you have enough to start crafting and bringing us some consideration?
I'm gonna go Team Tyler on this. I'm thinking it's a municipal code, pretty limited language on this one. And I'm thinking that maybe in the future they could progress into more development code details if it becomes an issue. What say you, Tyler?
Well, I think you're probably right. But I don't.
You're
like
saying
it.
that you're right.
Like the way the head ring, the more you talk.
Yeah.
No, I think that is what we're talking about, yeah.
So can you confirm if we limit this type of pretty small package of standards to their municipal code? What does that look like in terms of enactment? We know what a development code procedure would look like.
Yeah, it would just be a normal ordinance.
Okay, so it could move pretty quick, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
That means though, however, that we wouldn't have required notices mailed to impacted properties. Would
Right,
you-
it would be much more limited than any type of land use application.
Then it would also not include anything related to zoning.
It would likely still have restrictions on what zones they can operate
Already your municipal code, for the temporary merchant, prohibits temporary merchants in the residential areas except with
in.
special permission.
So we got precedents.
So if you're comfortable at this time, just limiting it to municipal code to get them rolling, sooner the better. We can talk through maybe what a grace period would look like to come into compliance. What would you expect to see on something like that? Would it be a 6 month? I think that gives them grace.
What's the definition of special permission?
Well, your municipal code says if there's, what's the word, negligible impact.
Yeah,
But I'd say any traffic is impact.
the code as it stands, Brian, is being uniquely enforced because it doesn't really fit for what we're trying to regulate, which is why we are having this discussion.
That's
Because we want to get
special permission to find different ways to do places.
this guy gets to decide it. And
Bobby said
he
okay.
consults 3 other very smart people.
So are we gonna be able to incorporate instead of a 45-day temporary, they could set to a year? Sorry, a year, gotcha.
It will be a different, it'll be a different category. It won't just be
Okay.
temporary.
You guys have the language stuff, we'll just follow whatever you say.
And there's already been problems with the people selling out of the homes, complaints and whatnot. I don't know, I'm just curious.
There's a house off of Black Walnut that does it out of their garage that impedes the traffic that's coming through because people just park right there in front of their house. And you have to try to go around and it's so close to the
Understood.
coming in. It's a little bit of impeding traffic.
Must be good stuff.
Must be. People have said it's no, so.
One other thing I would recommend is prohibiting drive-throughs. That's something that really takes a little bit of engineering analysis in terms of the stacking lanes and turning radius and all that.
Oh, gosh.
So I would just, at this point, just prohibit them for food cars. Not allow drive-throughs. Unless they want to go through a site development review.
Nobody was us.
Probably not. It's not a low barrier to entry.
Longer term. I don't know. Nothing at the old fiber fab, that. Maybe.
That's a good property, that's a good property owner, so you have to permission and, you know.
I know there's a person that sells ollies outside there.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I've seen them. I've seen
They're
them.
good.
And they're good.
But smellies are good.
They get brought to be.
Well, thank you, council. I think you've given us some clear guidance and direction and some language to work with, and which was the purpose of this work session. And you'll be seeing some stuff in print.
Thank you very much. And Kelly.
Thank you.
And the goal is success here.
The goal is good food and service.
Good food. Good food, safe.
Even just food choices just would be great without having to drive 8 miles, back and forth.
Do we have anything else? Council. Yeah. It's 8:35. We're closing this public meeting.
Thank you, guys.